Moscow. Here is the news. First, the headlines. The United States is under a massive terror attack. Huge death tolls are feared. Vladimir Putin, Russia's condolences. Russia continues efforts to resolve the violent confrontation in the Middle East. And President Putin boasts rapidly growing exchanges with China. Those were the headlines, and now the news in full. The United States is under massive terror attack. At around 9 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, two hijacked airliners, a Boeing 737 and a Boeing 767, both with passengers on board, struck the twin towers of the World Trade Center in New York within minutes of one another, causing both buildings to collapse. Tens of thousands are believed to have been inside. Shortly afterwards, there were reports of a similar plane crash into the Pentagon, with widespread destruction in the aftermath, and of explosions outside the State Department and on the Capitol Hill in Washington. A later report spoke about a Boeing 747 crashing into Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. Huge death tolls are feared. Tight security is around, and all air defenses are on heightened alert. Government offices, including the White House, are being evacuated. All major U.S. cities have activated emergency security plans. President Bush says his country is in the midst of a national tragedy of unprecedented proportions. He believes it is facing a coordinated onslaught by international terrorist networks. The U.S. administration is taking all the necessary measures to ensure the security of the American nation. This is what the U.S. President, George W. Bush, told newsmen, speaking before them at the Barksdale Field Base in Louisiana. For security reasons, he was brought there by his Secret Service from Florida after the latest acts of terror in New York and Washington. The president says that because of the latest tragic events in his country, he is contacting with other foreign leaders. President Bush says that all American armed forces, both at home and abroad, are put on heightened alert. By the decision of the U.S. government, a state of emergency has been introduced in Washington. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has urged the world community to act as one in the battle against terrorism. This is what he said in his telegram addressed to the United States President George W. Bush. Mr. Putin says that he is shocked by the reports about the tragic events in the United States. The Russian people voiced their anger over a series of barbarous acts of terror against innocent people, emphasized Vladimir Putin. Besides, he offered deep condolences to the United States over the terrible tragedy that it had suffered. On the same day, Vladimir Putin held an emergency conference with the power ministers. He has given instructions to take preventive measures to tighten security. Besides, new measures have been taken to strengthen the protection of the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. U.S. officials, including New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, expect daunting death tolls of thousands as rescuers continue to sift through the rubble of the sites of the International Trade Center in New York and attacked government buildings in Washington. Emergency officers say thousands of people had managed to escape from the Trade Center before its twin 110-story towers collapsed. Southern Manhattan is under a layer of debris and ashes, and a mass exodus of its residents is underway. San Francisco has introduced a state of emergency, closing businesses, schools, and airports. There is tight security around all American offices abroad. Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine is not involved in the acts of terror in the United States. This is what a spokesman for this radical organization, having its headquarters in Syria, Maher Taher, said in Damascus on Tuesday. Earlier, news agencies reported that the Popular Front had taken responsibility for the acts of terror in New York. After the murder on the West Bank on August 27th of the well-known Palestinian activist Abu Ali Mustafa, Maher Taher called to harm the United States around the world. Meanwhile, the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat has denounced the organizers of the tragic events in the United States and offered his condolences to the U.S. President and the U.S. people. The terror attack on the United States has triggered a nosedive in European stocks. Frankfurt has plunged 7%, London and Paris 3.5%, and Milan by 4.5% after losing electronic communication with the Wall Street in New York. The euro, however, has suddenly surged, as has the world price of oil. The European currency unit is changing hands for 90.5 US cents, and a barrel of crude costs $28.2 at the London International Oil Exchange. This news is coming to you in the Voice of Russia World Service. According to the Kremlin Middle East coordinator Vasily Sredin, Russia is maintaining intensive exchanges with both the Palestinians and Israel in an effort to broker a ceasefire and renewed dialogue between them. It pins particular hope on negotiations with the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. Vladimir Putin and the German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder have discussed coordinated international measures to restore peace to Macedonia in a way that preserves the territorial integrity of that crisis-torn Balkan country. A telephone conversation between them on Tuesday also reviewed preparations for the Russian president's visit to Germany late this month. Vladimir Putin boasts burgeoning exchanges with China, including in the economy, culture, and defense technology. Speaking after talks with Premier Cho Jun-si in the Kremlin on Tuesday, he also announced Russian moves to speed up parliamentary endorsement of last July's comprehensive treaty of neighborhood with that emerging global superpower. Mr. Putin noted the resultativeness of the Chinese premier's visit to Russia, which ended in the signing of a package of large-scale economic agreements.